This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and today we're going to look at what's going to be one of the hotter notebooks probably for the year. This is the late 2013 edition MacBook Pro 13-inch. Now that means Retina because they're doing away with the non-Retina displays. We have Intel Haswell inside, of course, that lovely Retina display. We're going to look at it now. So here it is, Apple's latest generation MacBook Pro 13-inch. They've dropped the word Retina from the product title, but this is indeed a Retina display. Now, just this week they announced these new MacBook Pro 13 and 15-inch models, and you'll notice that all the non-Retina models are gone except for the base model 13-inch. You can still get the non-Retina 13-inch for now, but it's only $100 cheaper, so honestly, why would you do it? It has last generation CPUs, spinning hard drive, all that kind of thing. This guy here has all the goodness of the Retina, but at a lower price than it used to be, and we always had an issue with the price on the 13-inch for what you got inside. Now it's not such a bad value at all, actually. What do you get here? You get a 13-inch Retina display, 2560 by 1600 pixels, very, very sharp. Intel Haswell inside, and here's an important point, and this really will make a difference for those of you who do very computing-intensive tasks. Instead of the Ultrabook ULV, or they're now called ULT CPUs in here, we have full mobile CPUs. Those are the ones that are usually used on bigger laptops. I mean, your average 15-inch laptop, sometimes your 17-inch laptop, rather than the little skinny Ultrabooks. So more computing power inside here relative to Ultrabooks with ULV or ULT Haswell CPUs inside, and that includes the MacBook Air. So that's some of what you're paying some more money for. This guy is $12.99. The MacBook Air has a lower resolution display and ULV or ULT CPUs again, and that guy is cheaper. Obviously, a couple $100 more gets you a good bit. Now, speaking of the MacBook Air, this is not a very heavy machine either. 3.46 pounds, so call it 3.5 pounds. So this is about a ½ pound heavier than the MacBook Air, ½ pound heavier than most Ultrabooks on the market. They tend to be about 3 pounds, so it's not much more. To be honest, I do notice the weight difference when I pick it up, though. After I've been carrying the MacBook Air or one of our other Windows Ultrabooks, you do notice the ½ pound. It's not quite as, oh my god, it's so feather light, I can't believe it. It's got some heft to it. But still, it is only 3.5 pounds. It's not really heavy. So for those of you who really want an Ultrabook, but you do massive Excel spreadsheets with 10,000 rows, you edit HD video, that sort of thing, this becomes more tempting because it has more processing horsepower. We also have Intel Iris graphics inside. That's HD 5100, so it's not the fastest of the Intel HD graphics, but it's noticeably faster than the Intel HD 4400 used on Ultrabooks with the ULT CPUs inside, and even faster than the 5000 graphics. It's about comparable to a lower-end dedicated GPU, maybe like NVIDIA GT 630 or 640, to give you an idea of the mobile M versions of those. So it's enough to give you a little kick to play something like Diablo or World of Warcraft 3. We'll show you Diablo 3 in a minute, as a matter of fact. Typical of the MacBook Pro design, it's pretty much the same thickness all the way around. Beautiful attention to detail. We don't have to tell you about that. I mean, the fit and finish on this thing is perfect. Beautiful aluminum unibody design. Not a rough seam anywhere. Nice to look at. Bottom here with our usual rubber feet, a whole lot of teeny Torx screws. Honestly, folks, there is no point in taking the bottom off of this machine because it's pretty much not repairable if you open it up. You're going to have to send it in Apple. If the batteries are glued inside, for example, you could get to the SSD drive if you want to replace it. Now, this uses the new PCIe with the gumstick form factor SSD. Those are pretty hard to find right now. RAM is soldered on board. The Airport wireless card 802.11ac Broadcom chips inside, that is socketed and that is upgradable too. So typical again of Ultrabooks, there's not a lot to get to, and the battery in fact is a little bit more obnoxious because they darn well glue that thing in. Notice here we actually have some air vents. That's nice that Apple finally made concessions to design and realized that these machines do need to breathe, so not just the vents right where the display meets the body of the laptop anymore, a little extra. Generally speaking, it's pretty quiet. It's metal on the bottom. You can feel some heat if you're doing something like, well, like I was doing, playing Diablo 3. It's not going to fry your skin off if you're wearing shorts, but you probably wouldn't want it against your legs if you're doing some compute intensive. If you're just using web browser and email, no, it's not going to get warm. Fan is typically hardly on. That's normal for Apple these days. They really don't like to run the fans unless they have to. Again, if you're doing something like Diablo 3 or some massive computing kind of endeavor, then the fans will kick on. Particularly if you're doing 3D gaming, you'll hear the fan blowing just like you would on any laptop. Rigid, no flex. The usual Apple logo that lights up, courtesy of the backlighting of the display. Now on the side here we have MagSafe 2 power connector. We have two Thunderbolt 2 ports now, even faster. USB 3.0 port on this side, combo mic headphone jack right here. On the other side we have another USB 3.0 port, full-size HDMI port, and a micro SD, an SDXC SD card slot right there. So, kind of typical ports for Apple, enough to get by on. Certainly you can always use a USB hub if you need to. The usual nice sculpted cutout here, so when you lift up the display, you've got a little place to grab on it. Pretty stiff as always with Apples. I like to use two hands to open it up, and you see inside the usual Apple great trackpad. Nice large glass trackpad, does multi-touch gestures well, very smooth. You know, they make the best. As long as you're running Mac OS. So this is the important part to get to, because I know a lot of you are going to say, what about this compared to the Samsung ATBook 9 Plus or the Acer Aspire S7 Windows machines? What operating system do you want to run? Macs are awesome when you're running Mac OS 10, and by the way, this ships with Maveriks, the latest, greatest operating system, 10.9 from Apple. Not so much if you're running Windows under Boot Camp. Now, some of you are just going to use Parallels, and that's a virtual machine environment, basically, where you're running full Windows inside, like as if it was an application on your Mac. But for those of you who are going to boot camp back and forth, the drivers on the Windows side, metza. There goes your battery life. The cooling isn't quite as efficient. The trackpad driver isn't as great. So, great machine to buy if you want to run Mac OS 10, or if you're going to use Parallels and just occasionally visit the world of Windows, or maybe more than occasionally. But I really, for those people who just want to permanently boot camp into Windows on these, I always say just go get a Windows machine to start with. Usual awesome keyboard right here, backlighting. Ambient light sensor works well with that. You can adjust the backlighting levels. Always Apple makes a really nice responsive keyboard. Pretty good key travel and relief. This is not as skinny as the MacBook Air quite, so we have some room for key travel, and you can see it right here. It's comfortable. It's a very, very nice keyboard. It's a Typistry. In fact, it's quite good. And the crown jewel on this machine is, of course, this stunning Retina display right here. Ever lovely. We're still looking to see if there's any screen burn-in issue like I have with my first generation Retina 15-inch. So far I haven't seen any. It does take some time to get images to temporarily burn in. Again, that's just a temporary problem when that does happen. This is a lovely display. Now, the Retina displays have always been quite good, but in terms of color accuracy, 100% of sRGB. Now, usually 95% is about as good as we ever see on something like the Sony Vaio Pro 13 and the Samsung ATBook 9 Plus, and in fact just the regular ATBook 9. That's pretty good. So you go from 95 to 100% here. I mean, 5% is not huge, but it's a pretty impressive thing when you can say you have 100% of sRGB. For Adobe RGB, we have 75%, which is similar to the competition that I just named, and very good. And in a laptop display, you just don't see full Adobe RGB. Brightness level, very good, over 300 nits. Contrast levels are high at 860 to 1. So yes, it is a stunning display. You can count every single stripe on these zebras and look at every individual blade of grass right there on this nice little desktop pattern. As I mentioned, this comes with OS X Maveriks, which is the latest and greatest, and as you know, Apple has now made OS updates free, so you never have to worry about that again. And we have the base model here, the $1299 model, 2.4 gigahertz Intel Core i5 CPU with turbo boost, 4 gigs of DDR3 RAM on board, and 128 gig PCIe SSD, and that memory is DDR3L. memory, which Haswell requires. Specifically, the CPU is the i5-4258U, and again, it has Intel Iris 5100 graphics. That's a 28-watt CPU as opposed to the lower wattage Ultrabook CPUs, and that's where you're getting your power from. Maffirex includes such things as a Maps application now, and you can just scroll around easily with 2 fingers. If you have an iPhone, you can actually send maps to your iPhone. So we have 2-finger gestures so we can zoom around the map. Right up with the trackpad for some reason is not doing pinch zooming, but you can double in or use the zoom controls on that. We also get iBooks. So that's not just for your iPad or iPhone anymore. So you can buy books right here, and any books you have in your account will also show up. Also, iWork, iLife apps are all included now too with the newer Macs. So you get the Mac compatible version of spreadsheet, Word document, PowerPoint. It's Apple's own branded version of those, or you can install MS Office if you want as well. Of course, Mac OS comes with all your PIM applications, your calendar, your contacts, and those all have a modern look. They've gotten rid of the skeuomorphistic kind of stuff, just as they did with iOS 7 on the iPhone and iPad. Now, for those of you who have more money to burn, of course, you know there are higher end configurations as well. You don't have to get the $12.99 model, though I think that this would suffice for most people, especially because Mac OS X is very good with RAM. You really don't need a whole lot of RAM to run things. In fact, that's also true of Windows 8. I know a lot of you people are just wanting to get 8 gig machines, but even if you're running Photoshop, Excel, and a bunch of other things at the same time, really 4 gigs is fine, but that's up to you. Anyway, since the RAM is soldered on, it's nice to know, because you can't upgrade it afterwards, that you have what you think you need. So for $14.99, you can stick with the same CPU that's in here, the 2.4 gigahertz dual core Core i5, but get 8 gigs of RAM and a 256 gig SSD. $17.99 will get you a faster Core i5, 2.7 gigahertz with 8 gigs of RAM and a 512 gig SSD. Now, if you really want to go crazy and you got the money to spend, you can go with that top model that I just mentioned, the $17.99 model, and then if you add another $500, you can get a terabyte SSD. So you're talking getting close to the mid-2000s there, but you can do it if you want. And as well, if you want 16 gigs of RAM, that is $200 additional above the 8 gig model pricing. So, as ever, there's configurable options here. There is no internal optical drive. Apple doesn't put that on their Retina Macs, nor they do it on the MacBook Air. It seems to be disappearing from laptops right and left, unless they're fairly large. But you can use an external Thunderbolt, USB, you name it, optical drive with this guy if you need to install software from CDs or just access anything that's on a CD. Mac OS does not natively support Blu-ray though. The battery that is sealed inside this unit, 71.8 watt per hour lithium-ion polymer battery, and Apple says it's good for 9 hours. Thanks to Haswell, they've actually increased the battery run times up from the old 13-inch Retina machine, and you know, Apple's generally pretty accurate. They don't exaggerate their results, and so far, we're finding that that's true. If you go with 50% brightness, and this is an extremely bright, high-contrast display, so you really don't need to crank the brightness up, you might actually hit 9 hours. So it's not quite as impressive as the MacBook Air, but you got a lot more computing power if you need it here, and a lot more resolution in the display. And speaking of the MacBook Air, we'll do a little comparison so you can see them. And now we have the Air right on top, razor thin at the front because it tapers so much. So from the front you'd say, oh my god, what a difference. But if you turn them around to their back sides, or even from the side, you can see how the gradually gets fatter on the Air. There's where your size difference starts to equal out by the time you get to the back. They have just about the same footprint. The Air is actually slightly bigger. As you can see, it's got a little bit more overhang over here. And we've got it lined up front to back too. It's actually a little bit deeper. But there's your size difference. Half pound less, lower resolution display, lower wattage CPU in our MacBook Air. Also a couple $100 less money, and plenty enough computing power for many people. And Now for the wonderful world of high-end Windows Ultrabooks, here's our Samsung T-Book 9 Plus, which has a 3200 by 1800 resolution display, just because Samsung had to try to outdo Apple. In fact, they did succeed on that front. Similarly priced, also very thin, also metal casing, half a pound lighter. It is 3 pounds. And much like the MacBook Air, you can see it's thinner in the front, gets thicker at the back, but overall the whole thing is thinner. Both classy looking machines, both beautiful. So again, if you're really more of a Windows person, that Samsung is really a tempting item. If you're happy with Mac OS, and I can't blame you, it's a great operating system, then the Mac makes sense. And now we're using the included Safari web browser to look at our website, Mobile Tech Review. Looks great. Works very fluidly. Of course, you know, it's a full power computer. That's not going to be a problem. I find the fonts are actually kind of large. This is with the default resolution. Now with the Retina Max, for those of you who don't know, we're going to take a look at display settings so you can see what that's about. But it handles resolution in an interesting way. Probably overall it's still more nice than Windows 8.1 even, but if you choose best for display right here, instead of seeing the 2560 by 1600, you're going to see something that's more like 1440 by 900, which is what you would see on a non-Retina Mac. Now it's doing essentially something pixel doubling or quick pixel quadrupling, so you get more pixels per square inch, so all the fonts look super duper fine and stuff, so it actually looks very nice, but things are fairly large, so you're not using your screen real estate perhaps to best advantage, especially for those who use Photoshop or anything that has lots of palettes. So you can also choose scaled, and then it won't give you the numerical values here, but you get the idea. If you go all the way to more space, it's going to run at maximum resolution. We can go to something that's sort of like, it tells you here underneath, 1440 by 900, which is actually what we're at right now. We can go large text, 1024 by 640. I don't think many people would need that. So we can go up to 1680 by 1050 for an equivalence. It's actually not going to let us choose the maximum resolution. Well, let's go to that, which was the old standard high resolution option on 15-inch MacBook Pros. And personally, I actually like this better. Now, you won't get as much of the font smoothing maybe going on, but that looks pretty darn nice, and I think it's still quite readable. Our dock is resizable, so we can make those bigger if we want. The desktop Macintosh HD is still easily viewable. So that's a nice option to have right there. If you're running something like Photoshop, boy, it's going to be cool because you got room for a pretty good sized photo there and your palettes. And also if you're using something like iMovie, you got more room for your clips and all that. As I mentioned, you get all the iLife and PIM applications built in here, plus Photo Booth. Of course, you get your iMovie here, your iPhoto. You can download Pages, Keynote, all of those things as well. We're going to test out Diablo 3 now. And also, you know, it plays video just fine. We're not going to make you sit through another replay of a YouTube video. Trust me, it looks great. It's beautiful. It's a powerful computer. It can easily do that. So here we are in Diablo 3. Let me show you our settings first. Now, they still have a bug where hitting Command R does not show you frames per second, unfortunately, but you have to do it by eyeballing. So we've got a 1968 by 1230, which is sort of like, you know, the close to 1920 by 1080. Texture quality we left at high because it does look nicer. Medium shadow quality. Physics we set down to low. Flutter density is at medium. We turned off anti-aliasing. And you can hear the fan running a little bit right now. Speakers are pretty good on this. Let's see if we can fight some bad guys. Alright, we got some zombie goodness now. Great stereo speakers on this. And the frame rates aren't too bad. We got a decent number of bad guys right here. Glossy display can be a little bit trying in a dark game like this. But overall, it's doing pretty well. And that's at high resolution with moderate settings. So that's Diablo 3 running on the late 2013 edition MacBook Pro with a Retina display. So yeah, it can handle some gaming, certainly. It's not doing badly at all. Again, we're playing this in Mac OS. This is a Mac OS native game. We're not playing this under Windows. So now we're out of our Diablo 3 game and the fan has calmed down. It only took about a minute and a half. You heard it though. It was roaring pretty well. It gets warm on the back. You can even feel the heat. It spreads out and filters into the display area a little bit, probably because the hot air is blowing out of the hinge area. But what do you get in return for that? You get some pretty fast performance. iMovie is also included right here. You can do full HD video editing if you want. Based on the QuickTime engine, so not the fastest to export among all programs, but it is included free. And again, a good choice because you get the dual-core i5. And there is that dual-core i7 as an option. Now, you're still sticking with dual cores if you upgrade to that i7, which comes on the $1799 model. So I'm not sure I would run for that. You know, it's not going to make a huge difference, maybe 10–15% at very most performance difference there. It's not like you're getting the quad-core CPU that's in the 15-inch MacBook Pro with Retina display, which is really the one for power users. But still, for those of you, again, who need to use something like iMovie, who do serious intensive work, this is great. If you only do something like normal use of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, you do your email, you play some HD video, that kind of thing, honestly, an Ultrabook, be it the MacBook Air or Windows one, can do the job just fine. This one is really ideal for those who have need for speed and computing power.